My name is Agutter and I'm a director at SIAM Limited.
My name is Markus Müller. I am the head of the service integration function at ABB Information Systems. SIAM is a framework or a function to organize multi-supplier management. It becomes more and more important because the number of suppliers grows. So multi-supplier management is a reality in many organizations. And the question is, how can we leverage good practices in order to reduce the complexity of managing the whole ecosystem of SIAM? So it is about a value chain approach, how to manage and govern multiple suppliers and service delivery partners across the whole enterprise.
So one of the things that confuses a lot of people is what's the difference between SIAM and supplier management? So how do you explain that to people?
I agree to that because everyone can ask what's now new about SIAM. We manage suppliers since always, so to say. And what is really new about SIAM to me is that we actually set goals for all the suppliers involved in this service delivery, and these goals are known to each suppliers, and very often they are the very same goals for many suppliers, so that suppliers can go via the same goal, and we are supporting them in doing so because each supplier has strength, weakness. They are very different with different practices and processes. So as an integrator, we are trying to compensate for some weaknesses, but even better, we are trying to leverage their strength.
Yeah, and I think what we also see as well is that a lot of organisations experience finger pointing between suppliers. So by focusing on the entire ecosystem and not individual sets of KPIs and metrics, you do get much better results.
I totally agree, because one of the things that I tell my managers always is that SIAM starts with the attitude, and we do have behavior patterns which are quite natural, quite normal, but in modern day business life they are actually turning out to be counterproductive.
Yeah.
And the finger pointing is a typical sign of a behavior pattern where you wouldn't accept responsibility is an important part of a value chain. And the integrator, our teams, they would immediately step in and say, okay, if for example an incident ticket bounces a certain number of times, we will put the suppliers in a room, figure out what needs to be done in a collaborative manner.
Yeah.
What else I can say about what's so special about SIAM? I think it is also making the whole performance transparent across the whole ecosystem. So here it's about shared KPIs where different suppliers actually just achieve the KPI if they collaborate. So the target is only achieved by collaboration. And we're trying to foster that collaboration. That's the idea about it.
And it's going above and beyond as well, because we can move from just achieving operational metrics through to encouraging suppliers to innovate and to actually collaborate to make the whole service better, which again is something that we don't see with traditional supplier management.
I totally agree. Supplier management to me is managing individual suppliers. Often in our past it was connected to the legal aspects, the contractual management and all this, but you can imagine a contract being static in nature is something totally different than our daily operations. And how to connect that, I think SIAM principles, SIAM practices help a lot.
Yeah.
So what I'm interested in, how is SIAM now evolving, since this is a new industry framework or a practice that's more and more known. It's an acronym that I hear in many conversations these days. I would be interested how it's evolving around the globe. Are there any studies or something you can share with us?
So SIAM's been in existence for 10 to 15 years now. There are lots of companies that would say we did SIAM first. Really it was evolving in different organisations at the same time. But in the last couple of years, it's really taken off. And we at SIAM did a global survey in 2018. So we surveyed nearly 250 people from around the world. And what we saw is that there's a really strong uptake and quite a strong level of maturity in SIAM right across Europe, in Australia, and also in India as well. But that we think is related to the big service providers that have teams based in India. So the one market where there doesn't seem to be so much interest in SIAM at the moment is North America. So the level of interest and the level of maturity in America, Canada, is just not there at the moment. But my personal opinion is that will come. Companies in the USA, companies in Canada, they have suppliers just like everybody else. They'll have the same struggles that everybody else does. So I'm absolutely sure that we will see SIAM grow. I suspect that they're doing SIAM in that market. They're just maybe not applying the term to it.
Yes, that's something I can also observe in many companies that I deal with and that I have insight in. They all do it, but possibly not in a way that's explicit and called like that, and also not managed in a cohesive way, so to say.
Yeah.
Is the survey also able to tell us a bit about certain industries that apply SIAM more than other industries, maybe?
Yeah, we did survey people and ask them which industries they worked in, and the vast majority were either in the IT industry, in the service provision industry, or actually in government as well, because we find SIAM very often applied to government projects. So that was nearly 2/3 of the respondents just across those three industries. And again, in the remaining respondents, consultancy was quite high as well. The area where I expect that to change, because we'll repeat the survey in 2019, we are starting to see SIAM being applied to non-IT services and non-IT contracts. So I'm hoping that when we survey again in 2019, we will see some more non-IT respondents as well.
That's a very interesting development, because I believe that the principles of SIAM can be applied to any managerial complex problem that deals with multi-supplier management, and certainly IT is not alone. If we look at what's happening right now in the industry with digitalization, I can see that many functions that are traditionally, let's say, in the porter value chain, they might be a secondary function, but actually they organize all according to shared services, and that shared services, in my opinion, are like a prerequisite in order to leverage SIAM practices, because here you've got enormous economies of scale on one hand. On the other hand, there's this tipping point, this break-even, where the complexity of managing the supplier is kind of eating up the benefits from the multi-supplier environment, where you would precisely pick one supplier with their strength instead of having a single supplier living with all these strengths and weakness.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got huge SIAM experience, really looking across all the companies that you've worked with. What would your kind of top tips be for an organisation that was starting to think about adopting a SIAM model?
For me, we could talk now the next days and weeks about it, but if I think about the top tip, what turned out to be really beneficial for us, how we introduced SIAM, is that we actually first took a hands-on approach. So that means, SIAM is crossing the whole life cycle, and it also basically is focused on the delivery part. In our environment, we started really hands-on practices, such as combining teams that traditionally were based in silos, pointing to each other. We said, okay, you're now one team with one manager, we applied certain management practices, Kanban and these kind of things on a daily basis, and we made sure that they coordinate anything they have to coordinate, be it problems, incidents, requests, across the whole chain and across the technology. Because in the end, it's also a journey from from a technology-centric mindset into a service and customer-centric mindset. And for us, it was super important to start on the ground with easy practices, such as involving suppliers into the change advisory boards, making them really give them a voice to bring down the risks. Or, for example, we made clear that the high severity incident management, which is then sourced internally because we want to manage our own crisis, that's risk mitigation, if you will. It's separate from the volume business of low severity incident management and stuff like this. This is more hands-on stuff.
Yes.
Where we started. That's something that is good. Now we're talking more about performance management, how to do effective demand management across the suppliers, for example, by influencing the pricing to the business. How can we make sure that our cloud-first strategy would be leveraged, and at the same time we need to utilize our data centers. That's how we try to ensure that suppliers will be aligned to what we're actually doing.
And did you still need some strategic backing in order to carry out those operational activities? Because I think that would surprise a lot of people. They would think SIAM starts at the top of the organisation rather than with things like incidents and problems.
For us, the journey was like building a bridge. We started from the operations, because I can show as many slides about SIAM as I want. What really counts is the costs, and if we bring them down. And bringing down the costs and making people's life, everyday life, easier by avoiding such a thing like, oh, great, someone else is doing for me, or avoiding something like, I thought this is done, or the famous reinvent the wheel syndrome. All these kind of things are addressed with SIAM, in my opinion.
So we can definitely see then that SIAM has the potential to deliver benefits at the operational level, but then also more strategically as well, as we start to move towards looking at service innovation, service improvement. So for me, I certainly see SIAM continuing to grow.
I can only agree to that. I see it each day. It's important. It's also a momentum that picks up. We do have communities of practice, and we're absolutely enthusiastic to get SIAM also into each and everyone's mind. SIAM to me starts with the hearts and minds of people.